But I am Jordan Zachar, I'm the I guess it's host, the publisher, writer of Progress Report. I guess I'm hosting now, whatever you want to call it. But I'm with very excited to be joined by Amanda Littman, who is the I got to go through the resume. Co-founder of Run for Something, now the president of the candidate recruitment group, and the author of two books, which one's coming out now, coming out this week, coming up.
May 15th, so 9 days, a week and a half now.
It's exciting. When we're in charge, I got to read it early. It's very good. Made me think about my career and my generation, and hopefully one day we will be in charge. It's like a threat and also a promise and also an ambitious thing. I feel like,
hmm It's a title that really depends how you interpret it.
and especially, I mean, the timing of it is. I'm sure when you start a book, you start working on it a couple of years in advance, but timing of it couldn't be better. That's for sure.
It's one part lucky and also one part I've been right for a while, and I feel very like validated in saying that. Like, no, we're in the brink of something big happening, and I'm glad that like this is coming out in that moment.
Doesn't that feel good just to know that you're right, like to be proven right?
I mean that and like a nickel, I have 5 cents, but yeah, it's not bad.
I guess it's not as great when you were proven right and like because everything went bad.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Um, but
like
the book is about it's a you run a political organization, but it's like a leadership book. So touching on politics, but really about whether you are running for office or whether you are running a big multi-million-dollar nonprofit that does political work, or if you are a manager at a store or you work at really doing anything. If you are on the PTA, as you mentioned in your
Hey,
book.
if you're, running a soccer league, if you're trying to facilitate like gifts for your kid's classroom, it's like all different ways of thinking about leadership and all the different ways it shows up right now. Politics is certainly a part of it, but this is not a book about politics, except in the sense that it's about how we interact with each other. So,
Well, it's interesting because there are, especially on the Democratic, liberal, whatever you want to call it, side, not a lot of young leaders. It's been obviously stifled for a long time, and you are one of the, I would say, one of the few that have really not only established yourself, but like created a larger organization. Right? It's not just a brand type deal where you are known for being yourself. And so that must have not been easy. Obviously, you come to it honestly, and you worked a lot of years working for other big candidates, and whatnot, but at what point were you like, I need to kind of share this wisdom or go on this journey myself to kind of discover what it is to be a leader?
I realized when I was writing the book that leadership has been what I've been thinking about for the last 8 years. I'm thinking about what it means to be a good candidate, what it means to be a good boss. I sold the book proposal on my daughter's first birthday after a couple months really thinking about like how, in particular, parenthood had changed my approach to leadership, and in particular, the experience of going on maternity leave with my daughter made me realize how few executives had been in my shoes. Like I
Mhm.
was 32, I've been running this organization for 6 years now. When I tried to find a guide on how to go on maternity leave, I found a bunch of stuff on the internet about how to ask your boss for leave, a bunch of research on how maternity leave and family writ large is really, really good for businesses and for families, but nothing about how to do it if you were already the boss. And one, damning indictment of the American
Yeah.
society government, but two, I think really indicative of like there's a whole new wave of young leaders who are coming up and also reaching like more adult milestones later in our lives, and we are trying to figure out how to do this all at the same time. So the book was born out of that, but I've been thinking about this stuff, since 2017 and much, much before it. Is that right?
You yeah, I mean, you work obviously in politics, and I work in journalism. Now I'm
Yeah.
leading into politics, but both position, both fields where it's a lot like young people working insane hours, just and like dedicating themselves to that for people who are older, to like kind of get the glory out of it. And it's been interesting for me to try and figure out as I get, not older, but as I age, I guess, and I'm in my 30s, to try to figure out like where do you find that balance of being try to be whether you're in a manager position or not, like a good example versus like I'm still going to go hard against all I know, or maybe I should, or also like take my foot off the gas a little bit as you get a
Yeah.
little bit older and your values change.
And like, is it actually modeling the behavior I want for my team for me to be working around the clock? Is that the most sustainable thing for the company? Is that the most sustainable thing for me? It just because I had to do it, that mean it's the right thing to do? Like, I think about it the same way I think about like student loans, for example. It's like just because I had to, let's say I had to pay student loans or I had to like go through hell doesn't mean the people coming up to me should.
Right.
And like that doesn't make it worth it. And I think, I talked to more than 130 leaders for this book. so many of them named that experience. Like, I don't want to do this the way every boss I've ever had has done it. And that means I don't have a model for how to do it, but I know how I don't want to do it. I think that
Right.
is
You have 4-day work weeks at your office or your organization, which is how did that happen? Because that's awesome. And I've been at places like, journalism's tough because the idea is that you have to always be working, right? But people have been, talked about it where I currently work, and it's never been like denied. No one's ever been like, no, you can't. But it's like, how do you even go about proposing that versus and making that happen?
so we started in, I think, 2019 or 2020, whatever I wrote in the book is right. We started with summer. It's just like after 2 o'clock on Friday in the summer, you can log off. That seemed to be working pretty well. We matched that with no internal meetings on Monday mornings. So you could like start your week sort of like getting your head straight without too much on your calendar. When COVID hit, we decided to start 20 summer Fridays a little early. So we kicked it like April.
There.
And when the fall came through, we were still really burnt out. We just kept them going. 2021, my co-founder Ross Morales Ricchetto and I started chewing on like, what if instead of just ending at 2 on Friday, we didn't work Fridays at all? We are tired. We are burnt out. We've been doing this for at that point 6 years. What is a better way of doing this?
Right.
So we asked our amazing COO to find out, do a little research, figure out what it could be, what would we need to change. And we got enrolled in a pilot program that was being run by a global research organization, I believe out of the UK. And what they did with us was survey our staff, um, ask like your stress, your burnout, your electricity bills, the time you're spending with your family. They did a bunch of skills building for our team. They helped us measure like exactly the impact it was having both on our productivity and our retention and morale. Got approval from our board, and we kicked it off in January of 2022 thinking, okay, 6-month pilot. If this actually is affecting our impact, because at the end of the day, the most important thing is our impact, then we won't stick with it, but we should try it. What we found at the end of those 6 months, impact went up, work life satisfaction went up, job satisfaction went up, burnout, stress, anxiety plummeted. We even, when we like surveyed our staff before we did it, we had some folks on our team who were like, I like the idea of this, but I'm really nervous about not being able to get my work done. Like, this is a great thing about hiring mission driven people. They were very anxious about it. Um, but at the end of the pilot, when we went back to folks, I remember one person vividly saying, the things I get to say no to, things I have to say no to at work, allow me to say yes to things in my family that make it worth it. Our impact in 2022 was bigger than ever. Our fundraising was higher than ever. Like, we were able to find a way to balance the long-term sustainability of the program with the short-term urgency of everything we do. It's hard. Like, I'm not going to pretend it's not hard to sort of figure out how to recalibrate your schedule and think about deliverables. Like, you have to onboard to it the same way you onboard to any new job. But I am never working a Friday again, especially now that I have kids.
Yeah.
I mean, you know this, like, weekends with your kids are exhausting. I'm sure you can hear mine yelling downstairs,
Yep.
like, they are rough. I love my children, but they are rough. Having Fridays to, like, recoup, to, like, spend time with my partner, to spend time with myself, to, like, work out, to do whatever, to catch up on other stuff. It's such a gift, and I would not go back.
Yeah, I remember when I had our kids are almost your older kid and my kid are based almost the same age, I would imagine. And so I remember when my before my kid was born, I really like dad who runs the
Yeah,
organization. He said to me, nothing will be the same. And before we had a kid, and I didn't know what I mean. I knew that nothing
yeah,
would be the same. It was pretty clear, but I don't know. He could have meant a million things by it, but like just the sheer amount of like work I want to do versus like stuff I want to like do outside of work,
yeah.
with him or whatever. So I was like, oh wow, I didn't realize what work-life balance was until I think until he was born. I was like, "Oh, I wanna do something else."
Yeah, and it's not, and it's, like, very cliche to be like, "Oh, I, like, changed my life, changed my understanding of time," but, like, having a kid makes you really think about how you spend your time outside of work, and then it
Yeah.
shuts down your work week, making it 4 days instead of 5, makes you think about what is really the worth spending your time on. If you have 4 days and you have 32 hours, because we really do, we treat Fridays like weekends, what are the things I need to say yes to, and what are the things that if I only have this amount of time, I have to say no to? It actually really forces you to be rigorous, to prioritize, to, make sure, could this meeting actually be an email because your meeting time is limited? I think it makes you better at your job.
Yeah. But I think a lot about how I mean, I work from home. I wish I had an office, to be honest with you, because it's, like, it's tough to, like, I'm always used to being out in the field, doing things as a journalist, so kind of working from home, it's tough, but It's a privilege also to be able to work from home and have a place where I can work from. And then there's so much, at More People Union, I cover, so many issues with people who are whether they're working at retail or working in factories or whatnot, like jobs that are just so far from, they're going 12 hours a day constantly. So I feel like we're at this point where like part of society is moving towards, hey, look, we can have a balance. Then part of the society is just getting ground down even more than ever. And I think that probably reflects in in our politics too.
Yeah, and I think, like, we've seen the UAW has talked about pushing for a four-day work week. We've seen a bunch of these manufacturing unions doing it, and I think there are other ways that we could think about scheduling, about time, like, the 12-hour shift is not humane for anyone, and while I like, everything I propose in the book, some of it might be easier to do in white collar work or blue, but we should think about it in all kinds of spaces because everyone deserves the dignity and, like, the respect to have their time be their own. And I think a lot about what it would mean across every sector for the CEOs to not put compassionate, humane leadership and effectiveness or profits like at odds. Like, what if those
Yeah.
were both treated as equally important goals?
One of the things that I continue to hear a lot, whether it's from people from, I mentioned Starbucks because I just was like kind of covering them at the beginning of it, but Starbucks, not so much Amazon, but like I was talking with a corrections worker who's in a federal corrections worker who's in the union, and like they got had their CBA kind of taken away. For maybe now, I guess most recently the lawsuit says they are technically a union, so allowed to bargain, but we'll see. But anyways, everyone from them, whether they work on UAW in Tennessee, Chattanooga just got rid of a shift. No, but yeah, UAW, VW at UAW just organized. They got rid of a shift, and so
Uh,
everyone is talking about understaffing and thusly being forced overtime. And I think that's the sort of thing that I haven't heard anyone speak about beyond like the union spaces, and it plays right into like the 4-day work week. If you were properly staffed and there's an organization that like people had the right amount of work for a person to do, not too much, and you could go do something like that.
and it's like that's on leadership. If leadership can't make it work, if they can't build the staffing structure, if they can't get like the hours allocated, if they can't delegate work appropriately, like that's not a failure of the workers, that's a failure of
Yeah. Well, they don't want to
the.
because, have to pay benefits. Yeah, they don't have to pay actually, they'd rather pay overtime to people and, just, not pay their extra benefits.
I know. And like we should make it very clear that is not what we want to emulate. That is not what we think role models are.
Yeah,
That's not good leadership. That's not good management. Like you profits are important, but so is treating people not like shit. And
yeah.
we both as equally as like equally imperative as goals.
So your organization, it recruits people and trains people to run it, people under 40. And you've talked about having more people than ever,
Mm.
talking about wanting to run it. What is it? So I wanna talk about, like, who those people are and what they're interested in, where they are, but, like, what is the thing that have you found that, like, is motivating them the most right now?
So Run for Something has had about 44,000 people, I believe, raise their hands to say they want to run just since the election. Our pipeline is now over 200,000. So about 20% of the people who've ever signed up with Run for Something have signed up since November. All 50 states, a little more women than men, although not substantially so.
That's good.
75% under 40, all kinds of people. We've got teachers, we've got nurses, we've got people who were laid off by the federal government or got screwed over by Elon. And they are, I think, really all sharing in common this sense that if my leaders are not going to fight for me, I have to fight for me. It's like a real disappointment combined with
Yeah,
a push to action. The issues that they're covering, it's like all kinds of stuff. A lot of it is housing. A lot of it is housing. I mean, it's local
yeah,
opportunities are based.
sure.
Childcare, book bans, public school funding. Some of it is, more specific, like failure of leadership to fight for some kind of issue in their community.
Mhm,
It's real like cost of living stuff because that's what local government in many ways has
sure.
control over. So it's been very cool to see these people start to get serious very quickly about what their campaigns could look like.
That's interesting to me because it's such a leap to go from, I'm thinking about it, to actually running, and obviously that's what you guys do, and so when people reach out, like, how generally are they sort of like, "Yeah, I thought about it, but I don't really know what to do," or is it people who have, like, political ambition?
A little bit of all of the above. We get a lot of folks who are like, I know this is a thing I want to do, but I don't know even what the first step is. Like, I don't even know what questions to ask.
Mhm,
Yeah, people who are a little more further along in their process, sure. But a lot of people who say, I know that there is a problem that running for office could help me solve. Now what? And like
yeah,
that's why our program focuses on first time candidates. It's why we focus on younger leaders because there's a really concrete set of resources these people need that we have like fully built out the infrastructure to provide.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of it is just kind of a mystery, like, what do you do, right? And there's people who are just been in power for so long, and it seems like sort of impossible to do anything about it, but now, I think, I mean, a lot of them are dying in office, in Congress or, they all of a sudden seem frail and, we've gone past the point where it seems like an unattainable thing, right? I feel like they held on for so long that no longer they seem, like, unmovable.
And like running for office is hard work. Like, don't get me wrong, it's very hard work, but it's not particularly complicated. Like, it's not rocket science. It's, making sure you know what the rules are, following the rules, getting your signature, figuring get on the ballot in that way, talking to as many people as you can. If you can't personally talk to them, how do you scale the relationship building? Because that's all a campaign is building relationships with voters before a deadline of election day. Um, this isn't, I mean, like, it's hard work, but you can figure it out. And what Run for Something does is help give you the tools to navigate those logistics.
Yeah,
What I tell people is like, you got to know the problem you care about solving, the office you want to that will give you power to solve it, and why voters should want you to win. Everything else is logistics. And that
yeah.
we can't give you like the motivation to do it, but we can help you figure out what to do with that motivation once you know where to go.
After Chuck Schumer decided to vote for the, budget and, set off I mean, I was at I mean, I live in New York, I think you do too, but I was at the protest, like, the next day or so, and it was just wild, and so many people were angry, and you posted a video about, "You can run, you can do something about this." I'm curious how many people, like, from that point you mentioned how many people have been running since or reached out to you since the election. What about since Democrats caved on that?
I'd have to look back at that exact date, but I will tell you that weekend was one of our biggest surges in candidate signups yet.
Really?
Yeah, I
I'm
remember if you
just pissed.
look at the chart, you can see like it's da, 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 up, and like I think he really pissed people off, and it was just sort of a nail in the metaphorical coffin of some of the Democratic leaders.
Yeah.
It's just another disappointment, and we
I mean,
deserve better. We do.
you operate this I mean, I guess we both do, but, like, you talk with a lot of people behind the scenes in ways that they wouldn't wanna talk to a journalist. And so,
Hmm.
do you think that folks, like, whether it's Chuck Schumer or people in that world had any idea that it would set off so much anger? Or they just thought people would accept it?
I don't know if they realize what they did, because I think, like, their logic of the thing I think Schumer messed up here in particular was, like, the communication leading up to that point. Like, if
Yeah,
he said straight up, "I think that shutting down the government would be worse than this, but we're gonna like," he could have done that very differently. If he always knew he was gonna vote for that budget resolution, he should have gotten something in exchange for it.
yeah.
It would sounds like you just handed it to them. You just gave them what they wanted on a silver platter and exacted no cost. Like, what is the point of having any modicum amount of power if you're not gonna take anything with it? I think, like, that was dumb. It was such a self-enforced error,
But
and
I
that's
think anytime they speak out now, I just think like, well, you gave them money for this,
yeah.
like for sending people away for extra, sending people to El Salvador or whatever it is. Like you kind of signed on, you co-signed it in a way.
Well, and, like, if you knew you were gonna do that, what did we get in exchange for that? You know,
Right.
put over the DC budget, like, you didn't do anything about tariffs, you didn't do anything about the illegal deportation, you didn't get anything. At
Right.
least said, like, "Yes, I had to vote for it because if we shut down the government, they never would have reopened, but at least I got, like, XYZ things." You didn't do shit.
And Mark Warner, he was on one of the Sunday shows, and I didn't watch them. I never watched them, but I saw a highlight is probably a big word, but him saying like he thinks Republicans are finally going to come around. Like they're very close, very close. And so we know that's not true. But I just like I don't know if they're just sort of out of it, if they're delusional, if they're trying to sell something that's not there, like if they don't want to take actions, they need to justify inaction.
I think this is part of the generational divide of, like, if you came up in a time of politics where it was, like, George Bush's Republican Party or John McCain's Republican Party, Mitt Romney's, like, even Mitch McConnell's Republican Party, this is none of their parties. This is Trump's party all the way down. You cannot pretend otherwise. I think that is, like, you came up into politics, our generation or younger, or you were newly awakened into politics in the Trump era, you know that these are not good faith partners in governance, that what they say behind closed doors does not matter because it does not reflect their behavior publicly. Like, they're full of shit. That means that you're sort of like freed of the old conventions of how things are.
Yeah.
That more so than anything else is why the generational change matters.
And one thing I want to tie it back to your book. You said early in the book, you kind of like thinking, why are boomers holding on? And you know, and some people older than boomers, right? The people who are, I guess they call it the silent generation. But they're holding on to their power and their jobs. And you mentioned like could be a bunch of reasons. You think maybe like some of it's like you face your own mortality. Like, what are you going to do? I guess when you leave, you know, if you're out of power, you don't have your job anymore. Who are you? What do you do? Like that could be for anything, right? For any job. Why does a manager hang on to the way past retirement age if they're not, why do CEOs hang on? But like with politicians, it's such an exhausting job to be a senator or something like that. Like it weighs on you, right? And like they've got grandkids. What do you think it is? Like, do you think that extends to politics, that whole mortality thing, or why do you think they're holding on?
I think mortality is certainly some of it. I think when you've had power, it becomes really hard to say someone else could do this better. I think there's certainly amount of ego. You have to have a little bit of ego to be a politician. I think part of it, honestly, is like if you are the kind of person who runs for office, you don't do well doing nothing. Even though, like, yeah, we like joke politicians don't do anything, but
Sure.
schedule if they have busy days, the
Yeah.
idea of having to fill their time in some way seems really scary. I also think um, when you're out of power as a politician, you sort of have to grapple with the consequences of your legacy.
Mm,
I'm not sure I would want to be left alone with my thoughts, and for a lot of these people.
yeah. So a lot of them wait until they can't handle their own thoughts. Their brains don't work anymore.
Yeah, like I wouldn't want to sit with what I've done for many of these people.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you just keep kind of doing worse and worse. You were very gracious towards Dick Durbin when you kind of said like you said something nice about him retiring and knowing when to pass the torch. I was less so because I really don't like that guy's political legacy, but like you were pretty gracious about it. I was impressed.
I think when people do the right thing, they should be celebrated. We can like absolutely spend some time talking about his legacy at some point, but when you step aside, like it's hard. It's hard to pass the torch. I think, you know, you get a cookie for doing the right thing. I think about, our kids. When you want
Sure.
a half-year-old to do the right thing, you celebrate when they do.
That's fair. That's fair. And so what's interesting is that we give him credit for that, enormous credit for Dick Durbin for doing that. He left and he was very disconnected, right? Like and a lot of these politicians are very disconnected. And I think to some degree, and again, I am a millennial, not Gen Z, so I guess I'm part of the woke generation because Gen Z has changed now. But do you think that's part of it? Like that sort of on the Democratic side, they're just such old people who are disconnected that kind of turned off young people because you're talking with somebody who are running for office.
I think it's definitely part of it. I think part of it is that they haven't been normal people in a long time. So like they don't know what normies are thinking about.
Yeah.
Um, Part of it is I think honestly some of them are not sufficiently online. Some are too online, which is like a different problem. But I think
Right.
like how many of these people like don't run their own Instagram accounts, don't know how to log on to their like Blue Sky or X or Facebook, whatever it might be. Like they don't understand what the conversation is or how people consume information or how people are living. There's certainly a problem where a lot of them maybe are too online and have got the brain worms, but like I think you got to be in the messy middle if you're going to be connected with communication styles. And I think a lot of them, like there is a real disconnect and a real generational shift between how, say, like we experience, parenting, childcare, housing, transportation, student loans, all of that, and how they do. I
Yeah.
think I love my grandma. My grandma rules. My grandma finds it incomprehensible that at one point in my 20s, I found a room on Craigslist to live in a group house in DC. And then in my 30s, I had to submit, dozens and dozens of paperwork and like thousands of dollars to move into an apartment in New York City. She's like, just doesn't understand, incomprehensible to her. In the same way that I'm often very clear, no, Grammy, here's how much I'm paying in childcare. It's why I can't afford a down payment because
Right.
my one day home ownership is going out the door every month to the wonderful women who take care of my children and make it work and earn a living. They just don't get it. And like, that's not a personal failing. They just don't
You
get
get
it.
a 3K. You gotta get the 3K seat in New York.
Oh my God, I'm in that lottery. Fingers crossed.
Well, end of May, I'm like every day. I'm like, what are we gonna do if we don't get it?
I know. I mean, like, this is the thing is it is so, uh, personal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I can't even think about it. I mm,
I think a lot of it's stakes, right? Like you have people coming to you who want to run for office who also can't buy a house, right? Who also like can't afford the student loan payments. They have skin in the game,
yeah.
and I think that's probably the People talk about fighting as a big nexus point for Democrats. Like whether you're like there's gonna be a split in the party. It's not ideological so much as fighting or not. But I think a lot of it is also, do you have skin in the game? And I think that we are finally, hopefully, seeing that change. And I imagine a lot of people you're recruiting or you're talking with have that feeling too. They don't just want to like be office holders. It actually impacts them.
I think a lot about how many people we've worked with who've been the first or only renter elected to their body of like
Yeah,
government. Where if you're a renter, your perspective around what it means to build more housing is totally different. Because like you're not earning building wealth by being a homeowner. You want more homes because you want your rent to go down. You want to have more
yeah,
like move into someplace. Maybe someday buy, but it feels unbelievable right now.
yeah.
That's the kind of thing where like if you don't experience it personally, that's not to say that you can't also understand it and be pushed and learn and advocate for it, but you've got that fight if you know how hard it is.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing some work with Jessica Ramos, the New York
Mhm.
State senator who's running for mayor, and she, no one in her family's ever owned a home.
Yeah.
Yeah, she actually has a rent stabilized apartment in Queens, in like Jackson Heights. And there's I think who knows what's gonna happen, but if there's someone who rents is the next mayor, which certainly doesn't seem like the front runners right now, but um, it would be the first one since LaGuardia, I think, who was a renter, and I don't think he was like not wealthy. I think he just happened to not own a home at the time that he became mayor. He was pretty young, so
Yeah.
it's pretty remarkable that like no mayor in New York has been ever been like a renter.
This is my personal sort of political obsession lately. 93% of elected officials are homeowners. In the New York State legislature, there are more landlords than there are tenants.
Wow. Well, that makes sense based on the way they vote.
Yep. I mean, like, that's the thing is you get it.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize there were so many with actual landlords. Damn. That's well, I guess that makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, wow, just cause didn't happen, so that's pretty wild. And so you mentioned, so that's a big deal for a lot of young people who are running for office. Like, so do you feel like they are? I don't know how much when you recruit, like, what are you looking for with people? It's I know it's probably not ideological, but there's probably some things that you have like boundaries with.
Yeah, the early stages were really just anyone who signs up with us has access to a whole bunch of our resources,
Mhm.
whether they sign up through Run for Something Civics, which is our C3, or Run for Something Political Action, which is our like PAC. We've got a bunch of materials for you to sort of learn how to run for office. Once you've applied for our PAC's endorsement, that's where we do a deeper value screen. So we want you to be pro-choice, pro-equality, pro-tolerance, pro-reducing gun violence, pro-climate change is real, and we have a responsibility to do something about it, pro-affordable um, education, pro-public education. There's a bunch of stuff. Our endorsement application is all public, so anyone can go see it on our
Mhm.
website. I'm sure I just missed a few there. Um, that's where we really dig in and make sure not just like how do you hold those values, but how do those values show up in your campaign? Because we
Mhm.
work with states and we work with a range of types of offices. So, the way that you show up as a pro-choice school board member might be a little different than a pro-choice city council member in New York, which might be a little bit different than a pro-choice, say, state legislature candidate in Iowa.
Sure.
All equally important. But we really try and think about it from like big values. Tell us what that means for you and how that reflects your community.
I've looked into a lot of your candidates, and there's already a lot of them.
Mhm.
I know you're from Virginia. I'm originally from New Jersey, so we both played in some elections coming up, and so there's a lot there. What are the offices that most people uh, are interested in? Because you guys do state and local, and so
Yeah.
what are the things that people? I mean, imagine most people want to start very small, but I'm sure some people go for the state house, mayor. Like, what?
Any given year, it's a range. Like this year, because it's a 2025, there's not that many state ledge races. I think about 60% of our races will likely be municipal, county, or citywide. It'll probably be about 30% education, and the remaining 5% will be state ledge in New Jersey and
Mhm.
Virginia, couple like legal offices. Most years, or even numbered years, where there's a ton of state ledge races, it's like 30 or 40% state ledge, 30 or 40% municipal, the remainder education and legal.
Got it, got it. And so most people go for those. And so, what do you find that like? Do you have most success in some offices versus others?
Our school board candidates tend to win a lot.
Thank
They
God.
Yeah, I know, tend to be running against some real wackadoodles. We have flipped state ledge seats all over the country. We flipped, even in 2024, we flipped state ledge seats in Iowa, Kentucky, Arizona, California, New York. We have won all over the place. North Carolina, Dante Pittman down the state legislator.
Yeah.
Um, it has been very cool to see that we actually can win in deep red places. We can win in places Democrats have not competed for a very long time because when you give people a choice, they it.
They show up.
hmm
I mean, that's one of the questions I have. This so start. I mean, for all good that he did, maybe as president, like when Barack Obama left office, there's the National Party. People it lost like 1,000 state seats, right? It was kind of bereft, and so it's been a lot. I mean, that's kind of why I started getting involved, also to try and start raising focus for candidates and money for candidates on a state and local level. For you, obviously you have a goal of getting people elected, good young people elected who believe in these things. But is there like a larger, all right, we're gonna say we were successful when this happens, like the larger picture, like the way the right wing has like a always a larger goal in mind?
I would love for us not to need to exist anymore. I would love there to be like a self-sustaining infrastructure built into state parties and local groups that could really recruit and support people. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. In the meantime, I imagine a world where asking someone to run for office is as much a part of the civic vocabulary as asking them to vote or volunteer. Like, we should be spreading the good gospel of running for office as far wide as we possibly can and trying to reach people who've never been asked to run for office before. And then asking them over and over and over again. Because I think part of that, if we do that right, and we do that broadly, we can bring some real service back to public service. We can make people really respect their leaders, know them, they'll have relationships with them. Something like 70% of local races go uncontested, uh,
Yes.
often by Democrats, although not exclusively. That means for a lot of people, like they're not hearing from their elected officials because their elected officials don't have to continually campaign. They're not building a Democratic Party because the party is primarily built by local leadership. It is such a failure um, of resource allocation on behalf of the broader Democratic Party. And I think it is something we have made a big dent in fixing, but we are so early in this process. I was looking this up the other day. The Leadership Institute, the closest analog to run for something on the
Mm.
right, been around since 1970, 75, I think. Its annual budget just in the last 3 years went from 30 million to over 50 million. Run for something's budget this year is about 7.5 million.
No, and that's with like years of building up too.
Yep. It's not apples to apples, it's apples to bullshit. It's like apples to trash, to the apple
Yeah.
core side. We're not fighting fire with fire when it comes to building long-term power by electing really great local leaders.
Have you found? I mean, I think a lot of times, and I found this early on, but you would find it much more. It's like people didn't even realize the importance of it and just
Yep.
wanted to focus on national politics. I think that's changing to some degree when they see like what their governors are doing and the state legislators and their insane school boards are doing. But I don't know if it's still the case when you talk to people around different parts of the country. They're like, I'm just focused on the U.S. Senate. I'm just focused on the House of Representatives, the president. Or do you think they finally starting to get it? Like donors is probably too.
I think normal people, people who wanna run or wanna get engaged, get it because they feel the impact of it, especially in these deep red places. They're like, "Why are my kids or why are my school board meetings being talking about, like, litter boxes in schools when teachers are not getting paid and our facilities are falling apart? I want this shit to work." Donors, I think, are getting there, but I think it's
Yeah.
especially on the Democratic side, they get very distracted by flashy objects. They wanna see, return on their investment. We're
Yes.
in a moment where that's starting to shift. I think the 2024 election, where we spent $2 billion on advertising for presidential campaigns and federal races, we're like, what? We're starting to see that change, but we still got a long way to go. Again, 50 million to 7.5.
And like those also Republicans have the state parties, they have local parties that are just really well endowed. And it's like, if I wish that we could say Democratic parties, a good Democratic Party had that, had as well, but they don't either.
Yeah, and like they've got Americans for Prosperity, they've got Turning Point, they've got the whole infrastructure built up, and they've been doing it for so long that they've got them a really well-oiled machine.
Mm.
Run for something is at this point one of the few places on the left that you can go if you want to run for local office for the first time.
Are there states that have gotten, I mean, so we're in New York. The New York Democratic Party is amongst the worst. Jay
Yep.
Jacobs is, I mean, I've said enough in public that I don't think he knows who I am, but I wouldn't be afraid of him hearing this, but just the worst, horrible. And so what is Have you found that some states, I guess Wisconsin's gotten better, like, where do you find, like, some states are like, "Hey, you guys, you're starting to get it. You guys are putting together a good ground game. You're starting to figure out local stuff."
Wisconsin is great. North Carolina, Anderson Clayton down there is
Mhm.
I think that there's been really exciting progress in a lot of states. It's been really excited by Missouri. We've had really great partnerships in some parts of Pennsylvania, some parts of Arizona, some parts of Michigan. We have really great partners all over the place. There are really good county parties in a lot of these places. There's also amazing grassroots groups. And I think one of the challenges here is the party always the right people to do some of this because we got to challenge the institution itself. Um,
Mm.
so have to prioritize. And, like, a lot of times their prioritization becomes the federal races because that's sort of, like, where you get the most they can, like, do the most sort of through a coordinated lens. So we go into a lot of states where we'll be like, "Great, we're gonna focus on these county or city clerks, we're gonna focus on these school boards," and the party will be like, "Phew, thank God you're here. We don't have to
Right.
work." So,
You wonder, like, what they're supposed to be doing, you know, if you're a local or county party and, or a state party and you don't.
it's like the doom spiral, like any, like, urban doom loop. It was tough, things went poorly, they stopped being able to raise money, then they stopped being able to do good work, and then because they couldn't do good work, they could raise even less money, and then all of a sudden it's like it's really hard to get out of that. You can get real
Yeah.
leaders like Ben and Wickler in Wisconsin, like Anderson in North Carolina, who can yank you up, but it's so hard.
And I think it's the same thing as maybe DC. It's like people are entrenched in power. They kind of just don't want to do. They don't want to let go of it, and so it's easier to be like the powerful opposition county or state party chair than to actually like doing anything about it, trying to win. I think that's part of like there's I don't know. I felt like there's kind of no overarching goal on the center left, I guess, right? Like they don't have a vision in the way that, or we don't have a vision in the way that Republicans and the right have had, like these different issues they care about. And they want to create a project 2025, and that's all very cohesive. And I don't think there's that on the left.
We often joke like who Republicans don't care as long as they get their judges and their tax cuts, but like that's kind of true. They really don't give it as long as they get their judges and their tax cuts. We don't have that same kind of prioritization lens. We want to do so much. We want to make so much work for people, for more people. That's a really hard. We want to do it all. It's hard to do it all.
Yeah. But I also think that like I'm always amazed by, and this is not to give them credit ideologically,
Yeah.
but the right and Republicans, a law will pass one place, and then all of a sudden you'll see it spring up that same year or the next year 15 other places. And I know it's sort of this ALEC, it's part of it, like that's all coordinated on purpose. But the way that they're able to do it and like stay on that mission, I feel like that's really gratifying for maybe local office holders, local voters, and whatnot. I've been following Colorado, right? They are trying to, and we're trying to help out, pass this Worker Protection Act, which
Yeah.
basically ends the right to work, so called there. And Jared Polis just won't do it. He's the governor, and he just, and it's one of those things where, like, if that were on the right, that guy would be, I mean, I guess he's not running for election, but primary to the second. There's no world in which he would say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm a powerful Republican. I'm not going to do this huge priority thing. And I think that's probably, I don't think that people should be cookie cutter, but I also feel that's part of the problem as well. There's a generation of people above us who, are so refused to kind of get in ideologically in some ways, who don't want to buy in, who want to not be, part of it.
Well, and I think part of the reason that the right is able to do that is that their donors are willing to make long term bets. They're willing to fund stuff for 10 years, knowing it might take 8 to pay off and 10 to go viral, so to speak.
Yeah.
They also have been really thoughtful about winning those elections where you can actually move the needle on these issues. And they are comfortable or have been comfortable in the past seeing battleground as a dynamic term. Like,
Mm.
Democrats, we love to invest in the electoral college battleground states. We love to throw money and do the work in places like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan. Maybe if you're feeling ambitious, a place like Arizona or Georgia. But think about all the places where think about New York, where the only people who are investing in New York State are the people with the worst possible incentives.
Hmm.
Like, I'm sure you know this too. How many of, I live in Brooklyn, you probably somewhere in the area. How many people do you know who took a bus to knock doors in Pennsylvania in October 2024, but have never done shit for a mayoral race?
Yeah. No, it's 100%. And even local council races,
Yeah.
I was, I was not to just be anecdotal, but I was covering letter carriers, about 750,000 of them nationwide, these or maybe not 50,000, there's like 400,000 of them or something like that. probably just getting the numbers wrong because it was in November, but basically, like the union there didn't like the contract. They didn't like the union leader. They were settled with the federal government. They had these big protests, kind of nationwide. It was just kind of a very grassroots movement. And I was in South Brooklyn, like
Mm,
kind of right near Brighton Beach, right near that
yep.
area, and it had just flipped red,
Mhm.
and on the national level and locally too. And there was just no sign of any Democratic politician there. There was no sign of like any like Democratic campaigning there. And it was remarkable just how much like, I'm sure a lot of people didn't even think of it to vote there, right? Didn't even think of a vote locally. The candidate was just kind of absentee. And there are people who were like pro union,
Yep.
honking on behalf of the union workers who are striking or who are out in the streets. And it was remarkable to me. Like this should be such a layup
Yeah.
for these working people know what's happening in your community and win an election, but it hasn't happened.
It's it is not the way that our especially like the national money moves because it
Yep.
does if it's not gonna affect the presidential, it doesn't matter. I mean, this has been true for, I'd say honestly, probably since the Obama era of like
Yeah.
win the presidency and we've got it all in the bag, and that's just not the case. And it leaves huge swaths of the country under resourced, under organized, which then you get moments like 2024 when a bunch of places swing right where we didn't have any campaigning.
Yeah. That was painful. And you wonder if I mean, who knows what's gonna happen, but if that's a fluke or if that's just like a sign of that things have changed now.
We'll see. I am often very curious. I often think of like how much of this is Trump specific versus the rest of the Republican Party. And I think
Right.
2026 will be a chance to find out.
You
And
know
then,
what's funny?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of young people, like, people who are in Gen Z, right,
Mhm.
like, who work, at More Perfect Union, and I it's we feel like very very left, and we're pretty,
Yep.
progressive left organization, but I wasn't amazed because I used to work in, like, the nerd space, the geek
Mhm.
space, where I saw, like, all, like, the incels and those people, like, turning to the right, but
Yeah.
I think that caught a lot of people by surprise as well, and someone like you who deals with all these, like, people running for office or, like, in that political space, like, were you surprised by that?
No, because we hear from a lot of folks like, I'm just so mad. I'm just so mad. And the cost of
Yeah.
real realities of your life, like, it didn't feel like Biden as president knew how to fix that. He couldn't in many ways. I mean, I think, but coming back to the conversation around housing, there's actually not a ton the federal government can do about
Right.
it. That's got to be a thing that you solve on the local level in many circumstances. They don't get it. It's not a
Yeah.
personal, just don't get it. And I think we will see how much that, like, you didn't make my problems go away, fuck you vote
Right.
comes, comes back around in 2026.
In New Jersey, so, like, there has been a lot of I mean, New Jersey's so expensive to live in, right?
Mm.
It's like there's no housing, it's so many people, it's really expensive, and there's been a lot of pushback against a law that was passed and I'm sure you know all about this, but to require a certain amount of housing development
Mhm.
in different, like, towns, and these towns which are ostensibly, Democratic, are all sued. So many of them towns and, like, middle class, upper middle class towns all sued. And I'm thinking, like, you guys are recruiting so many candidates. I feel like that's the perfect sort of thing. It's like, we need to replace these city councils and these mayors who just don't want to build housing with like young people. And this is the blue state. People wouldn't think to invest in that, but you guys could. And I'm sure I'm telling you something you know very very well. But just thinking about the things that you can do in a blue state and change entire dynamics of an economy, entire political dynamics without like oh it's not flipping from red to blue in the Senate, so it doesn't matter.
We were working with an amazing state assembly candidate in New Jersey, Katie Brennan, who's running as part of a change slate in I forget where in New Jersey. You'd have to look her up. Katie Brennan, she's great. She just put out an ad. It's all about affordable housing. Not a surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it can't. And so when you look, like you said, you have these surveys for candidates. You start working with them. Like how do you know when you see a really good candidate? Like, what is it when you're like, yeah, this guy or this woman, this person, this person's got it.
We call them our hell yeah folks. Like the ones where you know it when you see it. Where like they've got the vision, they've got the story, they've got the personal connection to community. You know it when you see it. That's not to say that so many of our candidates aren't also amazing in their own rights, but like the ones where I'm like, oh, you be president one day. We've got
Yeah,
dozens of them over the years.
yeah.
Very cool to see how that and it looks different, it sounds different, it's different across the ideological spectrum, it's across the like race, class, gender, sexual orientation spectrum. But people who just both clearly understand the problems that people face and can communicate about how to solve them in a way that's telling and exciting. Very cool.
What is what do you think it is that like? Do you think that they understand people? They understand how to communicate, or is it like something that in their own personal history that taught them?
All of the above. It's often people who have like a really personal reason for running. And so their passion comes through. It's also people who, to bring it back to the book, I write about this a ton in the book, like know how to know so firmly who they are that being authentic comes naturally. Like
Got it.
they know how to perform themselves because it's all performance. We're always performing, but they know who they are. So when it comes to communicating their campaign tactics, policy positions, it's not about like deciding what I believe. It's like, how do I communicate what I believe? The best,
Right.
that's the question, not like, what do I believe in the first place?
I mean, you worked for President Obama, his reelection, but I think people once they saw him in 2004, I was actually at the convention with my dad, and like people, he was like I guess a state senator then, and just
Yeah.
sort of like, okay, this guy's got it, you
Yeah.
know. And some people take longer to get there.
Yeah. I mean, I first decided to work, like, knew I wanted to work in politics. I was always wanted to work in politics, but I knew I wanted to work for Obama my junior year of high school. He was doing like a Students for Obama tour before he announced his campaign for president. It was sort of like road testing it all. And
Mhm.
I did one at the university across the street from my high school. So I skipped a day of school, which was a big deal for me. I was like a good kid. I skipped a day of school and I went to the rally. And when I saw him speak, I was like, oh, I'm going to work for him. I'm going to do
Yeah.
what work for him one day.
And so you worked for him, and then you worked for Hillary Clinton, which two very
Uh,
different types of candidates.
I worked for him and I worked for his nonprofit for a year. I then moved to Florida, worked on the governor's race there, which was its own interesting experience about what a candidate can and can't do. And then I worked for Secretary Clinton, which was um, hopefully one of the hardest things I'll ever do. I,
Yeah, I would imagine. And so, and talk to people are so inspired by it. Obviously, it was a very different time, right? People when
yeah.
Obama was running, and there was kind of a backlash, a million horrible reasons for Secretary Clinton, why there was backlash against her. But curious, like, you think there was something innate about them as candidates, not as people, but like as candidates that like someone could who was looking to run for office, at some point would like look at both of them and be like, here's the thing that I should or shouldn't do, or what I can learn from it.
I think for both of them, they both deeply knew themselves, like, had done the work personally to understand why they were running. I think President Obama was really able to communicate that. I think for a lot of reasons, Secretary Clinton wasn't always. And like that was one of the challenges, I think, is that, you know, because of the contours of that race, because of them, because of, the 40-year long Oppo campaign against her, there was like a lot of reasons why she had to be more guarded publicly.
Yeah, of course.
But like the thing that really made them both shine as leaders, especially once they held positions of power, was that like they so clearly knew the thing that they cared about. And that sort of internal knowledge, self-awareness made
Mhm.
her at holding power. I-
Just speaking of holding power, we've talked about it. We've kind of danced around, and you mentioned it on Twitter and whatnot. Like, so a lot of primaries, and you said a lot of people reached out to you and about primary. And I know that your group doesn't necessarily do that, like a congressional or Senate primary. But like, talk about what you think we're going to see in the next couple of years.
I think no matter what happens, the Democratic Party after 2026 is going to look different. It's going to feel different. It's going to sound different. It's going to be younger. I don't know if you can hear my 2-year-old. Um,
She can run.
she certainly can. It's going to be a different party because of these primaries. You're going to see, I mean, we've already seen this. Some of the older electeds who are facing challengers now are hosting town halls for the first time in years. Brad,
Yeah,
California is like actually showing up to constituent stuff because he's got a challenger. That's a
yeah,
good, Jan Schakowsky is, we're hearing she's going to retire this week. I don't think she would have done that necessarily if Kat hadn't gotten into that race. Kat Abu-Ghazaleh, who's a wonderful young woman running in Illinois. We are seeing, I think, a change in who makes up the party, and I think it's going to be a good thing. We talked about earlier; it's not fully ideological. That's okay. A lot of different kind of places we need Democrats to win, and I think that we are going to see a different kind of campaigning, which is good. More transparent, more visible, more online, more authentic. Um, I think we're going to see a party that is more in touch with the voters we need to reach because the leaders are more like the voters we need to reach.
and I don't want to take you too much longer, but I think about one of the things that it's sort of ridiculous that Trump gets called authentic, right? He kind of gets he says he gets that the people think, oh, he is who he is, right? And like there's this element of like punching down now, right? On the right, and the earnestness is now out. And you talk about it in your book, like millennials are earnest and Gen Z is a
Mhm.
little more cynical. And I'm wondering, like, can you imagine a Democratic Party that's like tougher and rougher and not as earnest as it's been? Because I feel like that's going to be a big challenge as well. Not that earnest isn't bad, but there's an element of like a party that's not necessarily with the moment, the darkness of the moment, I guess.
I go back and forth on this. I could see us going one of two ways of either like brawler, which I think is good,
Mhm.
or like such a deep disgust with assholes
Yeah.
that like I think you can be a kind fighter.
Okay.
I think it is possible. Like I think of AOC. Like AOC is not mean.
No.
She's a fighter, but she's not mean. That I think. Whereas like Trump is a fighter and also a dick.
Yeah.
And I think that there will be a way for us, and AOC is not, she's the first one that came top of mind. She's not the only one
Sure. Sure.
through. There will be, I think, an interest or a hunger, I hope, for a little bit more, not even tenderness. That feels so cheap, but like, it's not fun to live under a world run by someone who treats people like shit. It's not fun to
Yeah.
work, fun to be parented by them. It's not fun to be friends with them. It's not fun to be led by them. What if we had an alternative
Yeah.
that was
I
like
think.
both effective and got shit done, but also was like humane and kind
Yeah.
and compassionate. I mean, as you know, that's like the whole thesis of my book is that actually it is possible to be a leader without being shitty to the people you lead.
I and we maybe focus on this, but I think about come back here home, New York City. The guy who's winning right now, Andrew Cuomo. Horrible, a bad person. He's a bad guy. He was not a good governor, and he abuses people. He obviously sexual harassment. Killed grandparents. Like the whole gamut of stuff. And I feel like part of it is, we can talk about the media, and I can talk about the media till like we can do this live stream for another 12 hours. I can go off about the media. But and I'm part of it, and that's why I can do it. I think a lot of it like a righteous brawler. I was talking, to different candidates, and I'm like, you can be I think you should fight him hard, and you should just like say he's a pervert. Say
Yeah,
he's like, like hide your daughter, hide your grandma, like Andrew Cuomo is coming. Like, and I feel like you can be like that when someone is such a piece of shit that you're punching down,
yeah,
right? Even though, but you're a fighter and you're being nasty, but like you're being nasty to someone that's bad to other people. If that
yeah.
makes sense.
Like they often there's like the political social science research that talks about like the only way that women in particular, but this is not exclusively women, can like get away with being on offense is when they're on offense on behalf of someone else.
Yeah.
I can be mean to you if I'm defending my kid, my loved one.
Right.
I think there is something to that of like, you can punch at Cuomo or any other one of these other folks when it's clear I'm not doing it for me,
Sure.
people. I'm doing it for my community. I'm doing it for my friends. I'm doing it for my daughters. I'm doing it for whomever. Like that is a way to get at this that is both kind and like kind to the ones I am protecting, but also rigorous.
Yeah. And I feel like that also helps us highlight how bad they are. I think a lot of people are afraid of like getting dirty. Let's talk only about the issues because, I don't want to have distractions in this race. And it's like the guy was forced to leave because he's sexually harassed like 20 women. Like it's not a bad thing to say, hey, this guy's a pervert. It's not a bad thing to say like, hey, this guy's corrupt, or hey, like thousands of grandparents were killed because of the way he did and covered it up. And I feel like that's, it's okay to be in the mud when like what, you're sticking the person's face in the mud because they deserve to be there.
I often think my dad has this expression like, there's what is it? The high road has roadkill too.
Yeah.
Not that, not wrong.
No, yeah, that's a good one. I might use that.
Mhm.
All right. So when we're in charge is out in a week. And what is the when someone say what's the book about? What do you say?
The book is about what it means to lead in a way that doesn't treat people like shit, especially for millennials and Gen Z who are tackling challenges that our bosses before us never had to face.
They're so lucky. They can
I
all buy
know.
houses.
I know. Like, they didn't have to think about social media. They didn't have to think about transparency. They didn't have to think about what it meant to show up in a workplace that was like a Slack or a group chat. They didn't have to think about this stuff. And we get to do it differently. Like, it's a challenge. It's really, really hard to lead differently, but it's also a freedom from the way things were done yesterday does not mean that they have to be done that way tomorrow. We get to reimagine what it looks like. That's what the book is like a guide on how to think about it and not just have one playbook on leadership, but many, many playbooks on leadership.
Absolutely. Well, Amanda, thank you for taking the time on your Sunday evening. I'll let you get back to your family and go buy Amanda's book in 12 days.
Thanks, Jordan.
All right. Thanks. All right.